to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Roll call. Marion Shealy,
Here.
Debbie Dutton,
Here.
Scott Safford,
Here.
Joe Onsick,
Here.
myself, Michael.
Here. Barbara Puffer.
Here.
All right, all accounted for. Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes from the March 10th meeting? If so, is there any comments regarding those? If not, could I have a motion for their approval?
I move to approve the minutes.
All right, Debbie, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second, Marianne. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Okay, passes unanimously. First, we don't have anyone here for public comment today. We'll move into items for discussion. Joe?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Joe Onsick, Finance Director. So the first item, I realize you already know that I'll be leaving the town on April 30th. So I just wanted to provide an opportunity to publicly state that. And as of May 1st, this position will be vacant unless they possibly were to hire someone before then. As I was sharing a little bit, there have been a few excellent candidates who have applied. Two of them were interviewed. One's coming back for a second interview. So there is a potential it could be filled soon. And we're still accepting applications and looking for the right person. It's not my decision. It would be the town manager's decision. But I am involved in the process and helping to look for persons who have the experience that I know from having done the job that would be helpful for them to be successful. But I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any. And I think, Andy, our town manager, will also be appointing someone as an interim in the event that the position's not filled before I leave.
Who would that be?
I don't know yet, and I don't want to speculate, but I mean, obviously it'd probably be someone from our department, potentially, but I'm just assuming that. Someone would need to be put in charge of the department as a whole. Perhaps there might be someone else he'd prefer to have represent the finance department, but that it needs to be decided.
Because your team's understaffed right now, right?
They are understaffed. Fortunately, the part-time senior staff accountant that we just hired, he was to be full-time, but then couldn't do the full-time hours, so he's very good, and he'll be with us until our grant accountant is back from maternity leave, and then also until that position is filled full-time. So at least we have that person in place.
Joe, just real quick, I guess I can speak on behalf of the committee. You've been awesome to work with. Sort of the epitome of a tireless worker by hours and duty, so we appreciate it very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and I very much appreciate the support of this committee and town council. Although it has been exhausting, the high standards that I have for myself, but then share with all of you, is really what keeps it going and propels it forward. So I'm looking forward to what's in the future as it continues to improve and raise the bar on the standards here.
I want to thank you for taking on the task. I mean, I had heard that you did this as a challenge, but you not only as a challenge, but you want to help us. Yeah. And we needed the help. And from a town council perspective, I just want to let you know that we're saddened you're leaving. We're not angry. We're saddened, but I really appreciate the dedication that you and the job you've done in the last 2 years. It's been fantastic. You made our lives a whole lot easier. I mean, for us not to raise the millage rate in spite of everything that happened is just a true testament to what you've done. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. Well, the next thing on the agenda is my report, and really it's an excerpt from the town manager's report. There's really not a lot on here that's, worth taking up your time if you've already reviewed it. One thing we're still tracking is the third item is lost revenue replacement grant. It should now be coming to us any day now in this fourth quarter, probably during the month of April. If the receipt of the bridge loan payment is any indicator of how long it will take, once it was approved to be released, it took 6 months to actually see it in our bank. I'm sorry, 6 weeks to see it in our bank account. So it's possible it could carry over into May, but we're expecting it in April.
What's that amount, Joe?
That's about $7.5 million. So that will help us to repay the bridge loan in the event that the bridge loan is not forgiven. Okay, so let's see.
Joe, I just had one question
Yes.
on the, you mentioned the possibility of qualifying for $500,000 of reimbursement based on lost revenue? That'd be
Yes.
back through our P&C carrier.
Well, we have a business, lost business clause within our insurance policy. So we've submitted the information that possibly would enable us to recoup up to $500,000, but we've not had a response yet from the insurance company.
Okay.
But we're hopeful that that might be another source of revenue for us. Okay, let's see. One of the things probably the fourth from the bottom of my report, I did put through a resolution that's attached on it's resolution number 2594, and basically if you go to the second page of the resolution, this describes in section 2, it describes a loan that I've suggested and town council has approved of $8 million of cash from the bridge loan fund to the emergency fund. And this is to finance the emergency expenditures that were incurred as a result of Hurricane Ian, Hurricane Helene, Hurricane Milton, while we're still waiting for reimbursement from FEMA and FDEM. So we definitely need $4 million immediately to be transferred into that fund, but this would allow up to an additional $4 million for a total of $8 million to be transferred in as needed. And as soon as we are able to receive that $7.5 million lost revenue replacement grant, that's when that additional $4 million would be available. And as soon as we're reimbursed by FEMA and FDEM, then that money would go back into the bridge loan. So it's truly a temporary cash loan, and it's just to cover cash flow needs. One of the things that also came about was we were contacted by the Governor's Department of Government Efficiency, their DOGE department, asking us about our financial stability. And it was very specific questions that were asked of us. And so I included a formal response, a copy of the formal response that we provided. And basically, it's just to indicate that we do not anticipate any instances of financial distress in the next 6 months. And then it goes on to list the types of financial distress that they're thinking of or that could possibly happen. So we do not expect anything like this to occur, where there's no expectation that there be failure to pay short-term loans or obligations. There's no expectation there be a failure to make debt service payments, nor to timely pay claims from creditors. There's no expectation to fail to transfer taxes, Social Security contributions, or retirement contributions. That's all related to employment. And there's no expected deficit in the general fund. as a result of our operations. So we needed to put that in writing and send that to the governor's office, so we did that. I also gave a presentation to the Anchorage Committee, and I just wanted to include a copy of it for you as well. I don't know that you're necessarily interested in all of this detail, but because it was already prepared for them, I just wanted to share it with you. And it basically provides, the first page of the presentation lays out the history. So we've got, all the way on the right-hand side is FY20, and then as you move left, it's FY21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So it shows you the actual operating expenses compared to revenues. You can see that after they were running in the black Operation Rise up until Hurricane Ian. After that, it took a major hit with very little revenue, but still ongoing operating expenses of the mowing field and the maintenance and the cleanup. So that, as you can see, that's come down. Year to date for FY25, it's about an $80,000 deficit so far. And we actually budgeted a significant deficit for FY25, and that was $336,000. This would be offset by revenue replacement from the bridge loan, but we were being very conservative in the revenues, and we're already doing fairly well, as you can see, just in the few months of this year. We're almost to the budgeted revenue amount, so we're doing pretty well with revenue in comparison to what we thought we would have. That's middle section is really the capital expenditures. The timing of the revenues and the expenditures are kind of off because there's sometimes a few years gap between when we're reimbursed for capital expenditures through grants. So that is why there's that fluctuation. And it also, this was presented a year ago, and it does show that the mowing field has required some subsidy from the general fund in order to make the capital improvements as well as for operations. We will be making another contribution of lost revenue replacement for year FY24, so that should help to ease the deficit there. But that amount isn't determined yet. It will be this month, and the entry will be made before I leave, but it's not showing there yet. The second page of the presentation just is a little bit more of a detailed budget, so you can kind of see where the variances are occurring. There was some maintenance done to the mowing system that was not budgeted, so that's why you're seeing that $30,000 negative variance there. But because of vacancies, they're doing much better in terms of budget versus actual for salaries and benefits. So the overall variance year to date was a favorable $10,000 expense wise. Okay, let's see. Just want to make sure I am working on something I don't have it ready to show you, but I am working on it and have it nearly completed. And this is kind of like a master funding schedule of all the projects and what all the funding sources are, because I think it's something that we've been slowly developing, but I just about have it ready, and I want to make sure that whoever takes over for me at least has that as kind of like a map. So basically it's all the projects kind of running down in the rows, and then all the columns are the individual funding sources, so that you can see how much funding is available, how much is used for all the various projects or emergency expenditures or whatever it might be, and then the bottom line of what's left. So I think that'll be very helpful in terms of seeing the big picture of where we're at. And as soon as I have that, I think I could email it to all of you so that you can also see what I've prepared. The rest of the report, the only thing that changed in the town manager's report was we increased the amount that was drawn down from the state revolving loan program for the Tier 1 program. That's really the only thing that has changed. So other than that, we can go into the financial statements then. And I apologize that this is the first time you're seeing it and I wasn't able to get it to you any sooner. Just to kind of explain again from last time, the reason why it takes so long is in order for these to make sense, we really need to do all of the, update all of the accruals, in terms of revenues and expenditures, receivables. And really the focus of the effort is in the emergency column because there is such a large amount of receivables and revenues related to FEMA and all the individual projects. And so you have to compare the actual expense by project to the insurance reimbursements, because FEMA does not reimburse you for anything that insurance reimburses you, so you have to deduct insurance to come up with an eligible remaining amount for eligible for reimbursement, and then you do the calculations based on the type of project it is, whether it's 90%, 100% reimbursement from FEMA, and then you do the calculation for the state portion and then our portion as well. So all of that goes into just the emergency fund calculations.
Now, are you using the new system yet, or?
No, the new system, I should have commented on that. The new system is slowly underway. We're just starting the training process of that. The data conversion it was supposed to take place last week, but we're having issues with our current software provider not being as responsive as they need to be in terms of helping us. They wanted us to, first of all, authorize a quote for them to do the work, to do a discovery process to determine what they need to do on their end to provide the data. But it took them, we still haven't received the quote. So, and that was requested in February, and we've sent several reminders, phone calls. In the meantime, our new software provider is trying to see if there's other ways that we can just do downloads ourselves with Excel spreadsheets and then do the data conversion off of that. It's not as thorough, and there may not have every piece of data that's available in our current system, because not everything is reportable. That's kind of the issue, why it just would be easier if they could do something directly from their data files to us. But we'll work with the next best thing and see how far we can get with that. So, but that's just in the beginning stages right now. So we're not able to use the new system. For this, really, I'm just looking for things to highlight that might be unusual or something that needs explaining. In that emergency column in the deferred inflows line, that would be the offset to the receivables that we're expecting from FEMA and FDEM. So like 8.6 million of that 9.6 million is expected to be received from FEMA and FDEM. It's put in deferred inflows because we don't know how soon we'll be getting it, and it's certainly not within the next 60 days. Likewise, on the top side, so that due from other governments, that's that 8.6 million. There's also a $1 million receivable that we're expecting to get from our insurance company, but we don't know how long that will be, so I have that included on the deferred inflows as well. Okay, what else? Deferred inflows, that beach access fund, that's our TDC grant, and it's a long process to submit reimbursements and have them be reviewed and then finally receive reimbursement. So generally we end up with an amount that is on that deferred inflows line. That's what that is. And that's why if you look down at the ending fund balance, it's a negative 250. It's the same amount as that deferred inflow. So, because basically the fund balance should be zero in TDC once everything comes in, but it's because it's on a reimbursement basis and we're not reimbursed immediately. You can't show the revenue immediately, which is why it's on that deferred inflow line. Capital is similar. The deferred inflows has to do with grant reimbursement for beach renourishment. It just takes a while. I mean, there's they're very good at reimbursing us, but it's more than a couple of months, and our window, our time window for whether or not it's deferred or not is 60 days for government accounting. Okay, what else looks of interest here? One of the things that might look better now, if you go to the water and utility and stormwater balance sheet, is I think you'll see that cash and the net position is looking better. And that's because one of the things that we have done, or that was a little tedious process that we were working on, we realized that there are a lot of expenses that were being charged to the water fund still in 2024, 2025, that had to do with meter replacements. And we thought we needed to do that because FEMA was not going to reimburse us for that. But as it's turning out, there's probably a way that FEMA can. So we're shifting all of that expense from the water utility department, we did in terms of what's reflected here, back into the emergency fund. So that freed up more cash and improve the net position. So that's one of the things that I thought was important to take care of before I left, so that that's a more accurate representation. Stormwater is doing well because we've never stopped collecting stormwater fees, and so they're doing very well. But there is a concern that the water may end up running a deficit in terms of, just because of the lack of customers, and yet we have the ongoing expenses. So that needs to be looked at to see how that can be shored up, probably through revenue replacement. So it's a problem, but there's potential solutions for that. And we're also in the beginning stages of a rate study, which would reset the rates for water and stormwater to make sure that we're collecting the operating expenses. But it has to be done based on the full complement of customers, so that the rates are truly reflective of what it would be in a normal setting, not what it is now. Let's see, if you have any other questions on here, otherwise we can go to, there's several pages of revenues and expenditures, and I don't expect you to look through all this. I shouldn't have even printed it because it's very tedious. I just wanted to have it for you so that if you did have a question or want to see what a certain expense or revenue is, you can look it up by detail and find it on these reports. It might be more helpful to look at the budget versus variance reports when it comes to the revenues and expenditures. So I'll just pass over that. Cash flow would be page 13, 14 of the statements. You can see in the emergency fund quite a bit is going out in terms of this year so far to payments to suppliers. That's all the emergency expenditures that continue to go out. And we've had very little in terms coming back in. We've had a little bit in terms of grants, some insurance reimbursements, some transfers in, but there's not a lot coming into the emergency fund right now because we're recognizing the receivables, but we're not able to count, but we haven't collected it yet. So we have an overall favorable cash flow in the general fund. Is 1.6 million coming in. In terms of operations, financing, there's still a favorable 304,000 coming in. And of course, we have quite a bit of interest coming into the general fund, so that together with trying to remember what the capital transactions are. Some of that is sales, for example, auction revenue, but not all of that, but that's some of it. Okay, but we have favorable cash balances across the board. So 3.6 million in the general fund. There's only about $1.1 million in the emergency fund, which is why I was concerned about transferring more funds over there so that we're prepared for the next hurricane season as well as the ongoing expenditures. The bridge loan is at 9.7, but we will be transferring monies out of that into the general fund for the revenue replacement for FY24. So that'll improve the cash for the general fund and reduce it in the bridge loan fund. Building is pretty stable. We've gone down in terms of permit revenue versus the expense of running the permitting department and the building department. But we knew that would happen because we're kind of at the in 24 we saw, in 23 and 24 we saw a huge increase in permit revenue, and then we built up a fund balance that we're now using as now the work is progressing, and we still have ongoing work and operational expense related to the permitting. Capital, that really is a reflection of beach renourishment and also the FP&L, the turtleites, so that's why there's large expenditures going out. And the funds were there to begin with. We were prepaid for beach renourishment for quite a bit of that, and we were prepaid for the turtleite, so that's why we still have a significant fund balance there in the capital fund. Hurricane recovery funds, we haven't had much opportunity to use that. They can only be used for a select list of FEMA projects that was determined by the state, and they have to be obligated before you can use it. But typically we're already spending the money, and then by the time funds are obligated and we could charge it to this fund, FEMA ends up reimbursing us soon after it's obligated. So it's not serving the purposes intended to serve, because it takes so long to get projects obligated with FEMA. The American Rescue Act, we have the $967,000 left. We should be spending that down over this next year. And then the road impact and parks impact, we collect just a little bit of revenue there for impact fees, but we haven't spent anything yet. Okay. Water and stormwater. Fortunately, we're running ahead in terms of the income coming into water so far. Some of that, I think, has to do with the reimbursement for those meter expenses that I mentioned earlier. And stormwater has to do with the Tier 1 project. That's why there's more of an outgo there. And that's offset by the drawdown from the SRF loan. Okay. Page 15 of the financial statements would be the lost revenue calculation, or it actually, we're running a favorable variance on all of the revenue line items in the general fund compared to FY22 during that 5-month year-to-date comparison to FY22. So there's no need for lost revenue replacement so far this year. It's a favorable $866,000, so that's good so far. But I think this will slowly change as we move through the year, as parking revenue goes down and no longer collecting the property tax. Okay, then we have the line item comparison within the general fund. So we have the revenues, and I have it sorted in order of descending variance. So obviously start with the ad valorem taxes, has a favorable year-to-date variance at the top. Code enforcement fees, that's related to that $720,000 unusual collection of a fine. And then we have quite a bit of interest revenue coming in so far, more than we had budgeted, so that's good. And harbor use mooring field fees are up more than what we had budgeted. And then all the way down to the bottom, we've not had to transfer anything from the bridge loan, which is a good thing. We had budgeted a $2.8 million in total transfer, and so far we've not needed to transfer anything, so that's why that's negative. Expense-wise, let's see, the most favorable variance is wages. That has to do with, all of the vacancies, obviously. The landscaping, we've not spent very much. That $797,000 budget for landscaping, that's the Estero Boulevard interlocal agreement grant that we had from Lee County. That's been sitting in the general fund balance. It was budgeted to spend the entire amount this year to restore the landscaping on Estero Boulevard. The year-to-date budget for 5 months is $332,000. We've only spent $7,000, so that's why that is so high. But there are plans, and they are working on a design for that. So hopefully that'll be completed this year. If not, it can carry forward to next year and be budgeted again next year. And then contracted services. That's way at the bottom of the expense line. That's really all of the various departments. It could be anything, and it's really in comparison to the year-to-date 5 months worth of a budget. So some things we pay more in the beginning of the year than others, and we really have to go into detail item by item to determine what the cause of that would be. And I'm sorry I didn't have time to do that. I'm not concerned by it because there's so many other favorable variances, and I believe that's more of a timing issue. But I can check into that just to make sure. And then we have the variances by department. So we have the revenues on the top and the expenses on the bottom. Overall, we have the $1,013,000 favorable variance. Much of it's in finance, but that's because that's where the property tax revenues are, along with others. It's not that finance is generating it, that's just the department it's in. Code enforcement is its same $720,000 that they had collected. That was unusual. Otherwise, the public works, I think I may have to look at that. That $782,000, I believe some of that has to do with the prior year carryover that was budgeted for that Estero Boulevard landscaping, and that's a carryover. It's not something that you actually collect. You're using fund balance. So I want to take a second look at that.
Hey, Joe, do you mind, back on the
Sure.
revenue section, looks like from a budgetary perspective, code enforcement is significantly higher. Is there any
Yes.
particular reason for that?
For the revenue,
Yeah, we had a huge settlement
yes,
on a
it's
house
$720,000.
over there.
Okay.
And
I have one other question.
oh, sure,
Sheriff's
Scott.
Services,
Where is that?
What page?
page 17.
Okay.
Sheriff's Services, the actual is $25.
Is that the line that we,
That's
let's
the
see, we the
second
town
from the top.
allocated for like 2 officers?
Well, it should be. What could be happening? They might be charging that to contracted services. That could be maybe that's what's causing that. Sometimes things are not coded on the right line item. Thank you for noticing that. I'll have to look at that, Scott. So, because it's misleading then, because we do have a line item for sheriff services, and I know it's not just $25. So
I think we've given,
thank you for noticing that.
There you go. We enact those services, there'll be no more delays in traffic.
that was the only thing that seemed
Thank-
odd.
Thank you. Well, that's the purpose of this report. If it makes things like that stand out, so thank you for noticing that.
Sure.
Okay. Some of these negative variances on page 19 on the expense side for these departments is probably more of timing issues, so they're relatively small. But I can look more into like community development to see what might comprise that amount, just to make sure there's nothing unexpected happening there. But that's something that I would have looked at if I had a little bit more time before the meeting, but I'm sorry I don't have it ready for you. Then the last page, page 20, this again is just an attempt to kind of lay out all of the expenses by project description. This is regarding emergency expenditures for FEMA, and I'm sorry it was small, but I'm trying to get it on one page, so I probably need a magnifying glass. But it just kind of gives you an idea of what was spent and for what. So that's what that first column is. The second column is the insurance reimbursement. So the way I started out, maybe it's counterintuitive, I have expenses as a positive number. So that's how I started out. So then the revenues are actually the negative numbers. So you're subtracting insurance from the expenses. Then I'm subtracting what we've actually received from FEMA and FDEM. So that's a total of 18.3 million so far, which is significant. And we've received, well, also in that column B, I also have the contribution from the general fund. That's at 4.18 million so far. So that is, if you exclude that 4 million from the general fund, that's roughly $11 million of insurance contributions or reimbursements that we received. And then you have the 18 million of FEMA. So then that, after you take those things into consideration, we end up with about $8.6 million of receivables from FEMA and FDEM for all of those various projects. We're also expecting $1 million insurance payment. And this has to do with the temporary town hall location. So it's to pay for all of these trailers. So it's something that we've submitted and are expecting to be reimbursed for, but it's just taking time to get that settled. And then there's also there's $148,000 of repair work that was done, emergency repairs for a water break, that we're expecting to be repaid by the contractor who caused it or who damaged the water line, but we've charged it to the emergency fund, but we're expecting to be reimbursed for it. That's why I have it on a separate line, just so I can keep track of that. And then the last column just kind of gives you an idea of where we stand. So we do have exceeds current obligated amount. These are like projects that are above the amount that's been obligated by FEMA. That doesn't mean we won't necessarily still be reimbursed for it. We just may have to wait a while longer to submit additional documentation, and then we may still be reimbursed for it for there. It's just more of a timing issue, but so I had to account for that separately. That's $268,000. Then we do have some expenses that are unreimbursed, and you can kind of see where they might be. There's some expenses for the town hall, temporary town hall, like the preparation for that FEMA won't reimburse us for, and insurance may not reimburse us for, because there's that $1 million limit that insurance will reimburse us for. And then we have, small items like Hurricane Nicole that was not small enough to be considered a disaster by FEMA. It was not large enough to be considered disaster by FEMA for us, so we just had to pay for those expenses out of our own pocket. Same thing, the sand that we bought for residents when we had that winter storm come through. We had Hurricane Debbie, it's another one that was not, there's no FEMA reimbursement for that. There's 12,756,000, that was for, the cost of the Brinks safe. That was, it was to get out of the contract, actually, because it was unusable, it was just a crazy thing. But so there's, insurance will pay for it, but we did charge it to the emergency fund, cause it was the result of Hurricane Ian that we ended up in that situation. And then there's also, the fuel, the cost of fuel. It's not directly reimbursed, but we do get revenue from FEMA for, equipment usage that's supposed to cover the cost. So although it's not directly reimbursed, it's in the revenues that we received, so it's accounted for in that way. And then we have the unused insurance proceeds, that's really on the top section. And then at the bottom, it's the unused, that $4.1 million is that amount that was contributed to by the general fund to the emergency fund, for future emergencies. So that's still sitting there. So that's, to the best I can, is to try to lay out the accounting for where we're at with all of these emergency expenditures, as of February. So I will do my research on those items that were mentioned and I could send you an email on what I find, to just close the loop on that. And did you have any other questions for me?
No? Okay, there none being, do we have a motion for the acceptance of the director's financial report?
I move to accept the report.
Debbie, do we have a second?
Second.
Barbara. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. I don't believe we have any member items or reports.
I was curious what's going on with the audit. They have started it, right?
Well, it's been on hold, waiting for us to finish the trial balance. We're still making adjustments, entries. So we have until the end of this month, which is also what I'm trying to do, is get all those last entries in there. Part of it was doing that analysis in the water fund to move things out that really could be into the emergency fund. So it's just doing that kind of deep dive into those kinds of issues. So we have that. It's just a matter of actually making the journal entries now. There may be some other last minute entries, but we have until the end of this month to do that. And then they'll do their field work in the month of May, and they should have the financial statements finished by the June deadline, the June 30th deadline.
Oh.
So we should be on track. They're very, very good. Once they have everything they need, it goes pretty quickly.
Any other questions? All right, do we have a motion for adjournment?
Well, I actually we talked about the next meeting too, it was on here. I'm assuming we're not having a meeting next month.
Well, that's why I have to be determined, because I don't know what's going to happen, and if anyone would even be here to prepare reports for you. If you'd like to make it the normally scheduled date, like it's a tentative date, you could do that.
What date is that? So I was gonna propose, now that we're getting into the summertime, we had a lot of issues with getting people to show up for the meeting.
Right.
I mean, Marianne and I are here, and Jack usually. But
I'd like to go north, do Zoom.
Yeah.
so is it something that we wanna discuss when we should meet? Maybe it's every other month, maybe it's, it's what works best.
So if you kept with the same track, is that May 12th?
I think so. It would be May 12th.
Okay. You want to tentatively scheduled May 12th, and then I guess we'll see what happens at the town level?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, have a motion for adjournment?
So did we wanna discuss how we should meet in the summertime?
I'm sorry. Sure. I mean, I'm open to suggestions, obviously.
I'm available anytime.
Anybody have a
So-
preference?
I mean, I'm gonna be down here during the summer.
We try not to have any meetings in July.
Okay.
It's kind of our month off. I think we should for sure have a meeting in August before,
Let's say, when do we get
Before we-
the audit?
yeah, once we, and we're doing the budget in September, and we're setting the tentative rate, right, in August?
August 4th is the
Yeah.
tentative, or I'm sorry, is the maximum military.
Yeah, we set the ceiling in August, so,
Okay.
So we'd meet after that.
yeah, we meet after that. What do you think, Ron?
So why don't we keep the May 12th date, for sure? And maybe pending that, we'll stay on a regular schedule ex July, right? So we'd have June, August, September meetings. And I guess we'll just wait to see what we hear back from the town in terms of what the status is staffing wise for the finance department. It'd be a little challenging to have a meeting if we don't have
Yeah.
financials.
Well, there's gonna have to be financials, somebody else is gonna be doing it. And they might not be as detailed. I mean, they
True.
still have to do it.
I understand. I just tell you from being on a prior committee here, when, in a prior administration, we didn't always have financials, so. But we met anyway, so to your point, I think it's probably good to have it on the schedule. Does anybody have a concern or conflict there? Basically, what we're talking about, we'll stick to the schedule that the town produces as to when the committee should meet, with the exception of, July, and there will be no meetings.
Sounds good.
Makes sense? Debbie, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a motion for adjournment?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. Meeting is adjourned.